Am I the jerk for humiliating my coworker after she insulted my implants without knowing they were from a mastectomy? Posted by u/32402788189. I'm 28, and when I was 24, my mom died of breast cancer after both of my nanas had also passed away from it. I got some tests done and found that I had some potentially cancerous cells in my breast tissue. The doctor said I could either wait and see if they turned harmful or get ahead of it by having a double mastectomy. I chose to have the double mastectomy. I was warned about scarring but not the extent of it, and I ended up with scars an inch long and half an inch wide on my chest. I hated the way it looked. It got to the point where it was seriously affecting my mental health. I felt sick seeing myself and wouldn't leave my flat. I went to a therapist who did some CBT with me before suggesting I see a plastic surgeon about scar reduction. The plastic surgeon said the scars could be hidden with implants. I was naturally big, an F-cup, before the mastectomy, so I opted for slightly smaller but still fairly large DD-sized implants. They hid the scars pretty well, and I'm happy with them. My mental health improved, and I felt comfortable in my own skin again. A few months ago, I was at work having lunch with a friend while we were planning a holiday. She made a joke about my boobs exploding on the plane. She had known me before the surgery, and I knew she wasn't being mean, so I laughed. A coworker, Jill, overheard and, not knowing about the cancer situation, told everyone I'd had a boob job. She hated me from then on and made a bunch of jokes to other coworkers, calling me fake in 2 ways and more plastic than Barbie, always when I was within earshot. I asked her to stop more than once. Today, we were all having lunch, me, Jill, and a few others, and a coworker, Bob, was talking about his daughter wanting to marry a guy who has nothing going for him. I said Bob was being a little shallow. Jill responded, "Well, you'd know all about being shallow," while gesturing at my chest. I'd had enough. I said, "Do you know why I have these? A few years ago, the doctors found potentially cancerous cells in my breast tissue. I was advised to get a double mastectomy and was left with huge, ugly scars on my chest. I saw a therapist and a cosmetic surgeon, who advised me to get implants to hide the scars, and I did, just so I could look at myself in the mirror without crying. So maybe next time you want to judge someone for having cosmetic surgery, you should ask them why they had it first." Feeling like that was a mic drop moment, I picked up my food and left. Someone from the lunchroom came to talk to me, saying Jill was just joking, that I was being oversensitive and a bitch about it since Jill didn't know about the cancerous cells. I replied that maybe Jill shouldn't have been a bitch to begin with. Now, at the end of the day, half the office seems to side with Jill and the other half with me. Am I the jerk here? Relevant comments. Commenter. Not the jerk. Jill shouldn't be commenting on her coworkers' bodies. This could easily be seen as sexual harassment. Up. Please mention to HR that you repeatedly asked Jill to stop commenting on your body, and she refused. I don't see this ending well for Jill since she continuously commented on your body and pushed you to the point of feeling uncomfortable in the workplace. Ops response. I don't have any record of it. I only ever spoke to her about stopping in private. The 4 times I asked were in the lift, twice the stairwell, and the women's bathroom, all places without cameras, so the only person who can confirm I asked her is Jill herself. I can prove she's been making comments about my body by asking any coworker she spoke to, but I can't prove I asked her to stop. Op adds an edit to her post. HR wants to see me tomorrow about creating a hostile work environment, so it looks like someone reported either me, Jill, or both of us. If they're dealing with it this quickly, though, it can't be good. However, some coworkers have offered to write me letters of support for HR tomorrow, basically saying that they've seen Jill harass me, complete with rough dates and times. Update 1 day later. For the rest of the day, about a third of my office came up to offer support, while the rest told me that Jill was just joking around and that I was being a beach. I replied that Jill had been a beach long before I was. I then received an email from HR requesting a meeting the following day. When I called for clarification, they mentioned a hostile work environment. Note, this is apparently an American term and holds little weight in England, but it's what was said over the phone. I recognized the name of the person who signed off on the email, Debbie, who happened to be Jill's friend in HR. That gave me a pretty good idea of who had reported me. Realizing that HR was already involved, I knew I needed as much ammunition as possible, so I started gathering my information. Since Debbie had been handling my case so far, it was safe to assume she would be the one reviewing the complaint, and if that was true, I was screwed. However, I vaguely remembered a section in my contract about complaints when I first signed with the company. I flipped through my contract and found a clause stating that I was contractually allowed to request a change of reviewer if I felt my assigned reviewer was biased. The term used was impartial overseer. I photocopied the page and highlighted that section. Next, I messaged the coworkers who had offered their support on Facebook and asked, HR has asked to see me. Do any of you remember Jill insulting me to your face, and are you willing to write and sign something stating what you heard and when? Not everyone was willing to help, as Jill was somewhat feared in the office due to her friendships with HR and management. However, about 20 people agreed to back me up. I roughly estimated when I had previously asked Jill to stop, 4 times over the past few months. Some were easier to pinpoint because they had occurred during my break or when I first arrived at work. I wrote them all down, along with an approximate time of the lunchroom confrontation and a list of the names of those present. The next morning, I arrived at work slightly early. I went around to those who had messaged me, and most managed to provide me with a printed and signed statement, some didn't, but no big deal. The statements were concise, but they included all the necessary details. Here's a summarized version of what they said. My name is X name. I work with Jill last name and op. On X date at approximately X time, I spoke with Jill last name, during which she referred to op as quoted insult. I found this inappropriate as it directly related to op's appearance and am willing to go on record to establish that Jill last name has been discussing op in the workplace in the same manner for 3 months now, causing discomfort and creating what I feel is a hostile work environment. Signed X name. I ended up with about 16 signed statements, all from different people. One person had even witnessed the lunchroom confrontation with Jill. Some co-workers included bullet-pointed lists of everything Jill had said to them about me or others. Apparently, Jill had also made comments about a co-worker's weight and something anti-Semitic about another co-worker's nose, all of which were documented in these statements. Our office had about 45 people, so while 16 wasn't a majority, it was still a significant number. At 10 a.m., I was called to HR. I took the signed statements, the photocopy of my contract, and my notes in a folder. When I arrived, Debbie was the one handling the meeting. She got up from her desk, ready to lead me into another room. I immediately turned to the other HR worker in the room and asked, "So, is my meeting with you, then?" Debbie interjected, "No, you're with me." I responded, "That doesn't sit well with me, as my contract states I have a right to an impartial overseer." As I spoke, I took out the photocopy of my contract. Debbie read it. I wouldn't let her take the paper when a shredder was so close by, and said she could be impartial. I replied, "I really don't mean to be difficult, but I have it on good authority that the person on the other end of this complaint is your friend, and my contract says I'm allowed an impartial overseer." Debbie stomped off to get the supervisor. When he arrived, he asked how I knew Debbie couldn't be impartial. I told him I had good reason to believe Jill was a close friend of hers. When he asked Debbie if this was true, she only responded, "I can be impartial." The supervisor sighed, then asked the other HR rep to join us. The 4 of us went in to review the complaint together. I thanked them for accommodating my request. I was worried I had annoyed them. Debbie, on the other hand, looked homicidal. Clearly, she had anticipated firing me or at least recommending my termination. The interview lasted over half an hour, with them asking the same questions in different ways. Here's a condensed version of how it went. Q. You said outside that you think Jill last name reported you. Why is this? A. Jill has had an issue with me for about 3 months now. Q. Why didn't you come to us when you realized Jill had an issue? A. I had no issue with her. Q. What issue does Jill have with you? A. 4 years ago, a specialist identified potentially cancerous cells in my breast tissue. I had surgery to remove my breast tissue, thereby removing the cells and the risk. After the surgery, I was left with large scars on my chest. I went to a therapist for low self-esteem and depression. The therapist suggested a plastic surgeon, who recommended breast implants to cover my scars. All of this is in my medical history, which you have a copy of in my file and my full permission to review. Jill found out about my breast implants but didn't know about the cancer. She had a problem with my breast implants and decided to communicate this problem to our coworkers. Q. Why do you feel this is true? A. Here are 16 signed statements from different coworkers, all testifying that Jill told the entire office about my breast implants on the day she found out and has since made frequent comments about them. They include quotes of what Jill said and rough dates and times. Q. Rough dates and times? A. No one knew this would escalate to such an extent, so no one really took notes as and when it happened. Q. What event or events do you think directly led to this complaint of harassment? A. For me, harassment began when Jill told everyone about my breast implants without my consent. As for the complaint placed against me, it was probably what happened at about X time yesterday in the lunchroom. Jill made a comment about me being shallow while gesturing to my breasts, and I replied by giving her an abridged version of my relevant medical history, ending with a comment about the importance of getting the full story. There are cameras in the lunchroom, so I'm sure you'll be able to find that conversation. I'll admit I could have handled the situation better, but after 3 months, I felt I had to put my foot down. Here's a list of names of people who were also present. There were 6 people at the table, including myself and Jill. One of these people is also in those letters and has written their account of the conversation and signed it. Q. Had you had a conversation with Jill prior to this regarding her comments about you? A. Several, spaced out over the last 3 months. Each time, I communicated to her that I felt uncomfortable and upset with these comments she was making and would appreciate it if she stopped. Q. To your knowledge, was Jill made aware of your former cancer at any point during this time? A. No, it wasn't mentioned in the conversation with my friend that she overheard, and I didn't tell her because, frankly, it's none of her business. I did not feel the need to detail my medical history to a coworker in order to avoid further sexual harassment. The supervisor stands up and says, "Well, I think we're done here." He shakes my hand and sends me back to my desk, saying that I'd hear from them after they reviewed the evidence, letters, CCTV, medical history, and anything they already had, and made a decision on the case. I return to my desk, pull up my CV, and prepare to start the job search again. About an hour goes by, then the person who wrote the letter and was present for the lunchroom conversation gets called for a meeting with HR. They come back about 10 minutes later. The other people who were also present for the lunchroom conversation get called one by one, except Jill. Each of them is gone for about 10 minutes before returning, finding a coworker, and telling them that HR wants to see them. Then, the people who wrote letters but weren't there yesterday are also called in one by one, each gone for about 10 minutes, some longer, some shorter. By about 3:30, it looks like everyone who wrote a letter or was in the lunchroom has been interviewed. Then, finally, Jill gets called in. She's gone for about 30 minutes and comes back fuming. She glares at me while I work, but I ignore her. Around 4:30, Jill gets called into HR again. By 5 p.m., everyone is either leaving or getting ready to leave when Jill storms back into the office. She glares at me the entire time she packs up her desk, then starts telling anyone who will listen that I got her fired before shoving her way onto the lift. An email comes in from HR. My case is closed.